You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you are listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, my guest is a colleague of another guest I had on a few episodes ago, and we are going to continue a discussion about the globally conscious leader. My guest is a gentleman named John Lamy. John, welcome to the show.
Doug, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So let's dive right in. Tell me your definition of what is a globally conscious leader.
A person at or near the helm of a company, or it could be a nonprofit, or it could be a university or something like that, who has an emerging, developing mindset that reaches beyond the nominal responsibility defined in their job for their institution only. They begin to look, and it's a process. It's going to go on a long time. It's going to be reaching out and saying, for one thing, what are the impacts of what I do? You know, I'm doing something here. What's going to be the impact on other people in my community, other people in my geographic, political sphere, other people in the whole planet. What's the impact on them? And as you do that, another thing happens. This is going to be a little bit of a off to the side, but why do we have a climate crisis? You can talk about CO2 and energy and consumption and all that. Yes, for sure. But there's another thing that's going on, and that's a kind of an alienation from the planet, or even an alienation from each other, that we think of ourselves as, you know, here's the earth and then here's me. And if I'm a manufacturing company, which I spent 30 years in a company like that, the earth is just this thing out there that we take materials out of, we do something with them, and then we put it back as waste. And the scientists will tell you that we're doing that aggregately at about twice what the planet is capable of doing today. Just aggregated all together. We're taking it out about twice as much as it can supply and putting back pollution that is about twice what the planet can reabsorb. Okay, back to your question. A globally conscious leader begins to think about that. Think about that alienation attitude and that, even in the Bible it says, have dominion over the planet, over the fish and the birds. Have dominion. And you'd go, no, as a globally conscious leader, I'm going to think of myself as more unified with the planet. And, frankly, more unified with other people. We live in such a climate right now. I don't know when this is going to air, but right today, when Doug and I are talking, it's just a couple weeks after the election, the national election, and there's such a feeling of alienation in our country right now. And that's destructive. And I think it really does contribute to the climate crisis and our other existential crises. So you begin to move beyond that and realize that even people that you think are your enemies, well, they may have a point of view that's correct. They may have something in there that's right. It can't all be wrong. So the globally conscious leader begins to overcome that one as well, that kind of an alienation. So that's a long-winded answer. It might have been better to just give you a sentence, but that's what I think the globally conscious leader is all about.
I like that, and I think, and to my listeners, as I think you know me, I never want to politicize this show, and I don't want to go there at all. But I to your point, I think there are some critical issues to understand, and part of it has to do with I think the ever-present mindset of, I'm either climbing a management chain in a large business, or I've had the opportunity to go start a business or buy a business and run a business that pre-exists. And I'm at the helm, as you said, doing this. And there's the immediate focus on profitability. That's why we do business. We want to make profits for people, whether it's investors in a private business or shareholders in a public business, or even stakeholders, talking about universities and nonprofits. There are needs to essentially make money so that you can do more of what it is you're trying to do. So it's the grow and scale mindset. And on one hand, it's easy to see why that runs sort of head on into the idea of being sensitive to and in harmony with the planet. Saving things. Don't be wasteful. Don't let your output be somebody else's problem. Whether it's what's the word in manufacturing for the parts you don't use, the parts you cut away from your raw material and
like waste, I guess.
Throw away. Yeah, just waste, I guess. So, and I'm curious, John, in your mind, I had a great episode recently with a lady who is all in the realm of sustainability for businesses. And as we got into sustainability, as she explained to us, her name's Vanessa Thompson, as she explained to us, it's more than the classic. We've gone through a period in business of everybody focused on so-called GSE, and that does have an environmental protection element in it. But her argument was the issue's bigger than that. And I think I'm correlating what you're saying with kind of what she said there. It actually is a bigger picture. You don't just launch a program to do your part to reduce your carbon emission, and that's the end of the game.
Yeah, you're opening up a big systemic, interconnected kind of subject. I'll pick up on one thread. I see on your Zoom ID thing is you're an MBA, and so am I. And I really appreciate having done that work. And I'm a capitalist, but I think capitalism has morphed over into something that I don't think is healthy. I think it's gone a little too far in the direction that you pointed out, where you think about the main stakeholder is the shareholder, end of story, and to maximize the profit for that person or shareholders is actually kind of self-destructive in the end, because it's definitely short term. You typically think about a month or a quarter. But if you thought about 10 years, and maybe this is what the lady was talking about too, with sustainability, if we do things to harm the planet, like right now with climate change, the expense associated with those two big storms in the Gulf that worked their way up the East Coast, billions and billions of dollars. Who pays for that? Who pays for that? Well, I don't know how it's going to get paid for, but it's extremely expensive. So I think we've let a narrowness, and I guess I'm going to lay some blame on Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize winner, University of Chicago professor. But he said that I'm going to paraphrase now a little bit, the only real obligation business has is to get shareholder wealth. That the social obligation of a business is basically zero. And I am paraphrasing him, but I think that mindset has now permeated the corporate world to some extent, not completely though. I worked for a great company where that really wasn't the 100% thing, but it is a big impact. We've got to somehow recenter that thing. I'm not one of these folks who said, let's just get rid of capitalism, it's no good. No, I don't think that. I think it's more natural. It's a natural thing. But we need to have a more expansive view of how it all works and what the real expenses are. And maybe Steve talked about externalities, where you have things that you are involved with it are not in your financials. They don't show up in your profit and loss or your balance sheet. So we've got to think about those things. So I hope that's what the guy you were talking about said, but
yeah, I think it is, and yes, sustainability was on one hand a little bit self-serving in that for a company to exist in the long game, what she was advocating, there's some things you've got to do now. You have to think about your infrastructure and your ability to withstand a storm, for instance. I mean, very tactical, very practical situations, but it did include that bigger picture. And as you were describing your thought on this, the thing that came to my mind was the idea that generationally we see a pendulum swing in some of the younger generations that are entering the workforce. They are, well, I guess I'll use the word demanding that the company they work for has a commitment to that bigger ecosystem you're talking about.
yeah,
And they're questioning company values, company purpose, company mission, vision, all of that. So, when they ask the question, why does this company exist? What are you doing and how are you doing it? All of that is flavored with an intent of, I don't want to work for a company that's going to perpetuate this problem for the planet.
yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things we do in our strategic planning offering is to point out that if you do these things, you will attract a higher caliber of employee. You'll attract them and you'll keep them. I worked for Hewlett Packard back. I started in the late '60s and went to about 2000. So 35 years. It was a fantastic company back then. We were able to really attract and keep top people. We paid them very well, paid us very well. But we also did more than that. We provided a vision of really contributing to the world. We made electronic instruments, measurement instruments back then. And I worked in research and development, and it was kind of a mission thing. We would provide better and better, more accurate, more precise measurements of things, and we were giving something to the world by doing that. And so we encouraged ownership at the lowest level possible. We encouraged the R&D folks to own their product and to think up new ideas, and we did. It was just great, and it was fun. It was really fun to work there. I mean, not only did they pay us well, but it was fun, and it was a respectable job. It was just all around great. And I think what you pointed out is the newer generations are looking for that again. They really want that again. So if companies want to get and keep good people, and they should, that not everybody thinks that way. I've had clients who just say, well, payroll is an expense. Let's minimize that. It's, makes sense. Of course it makes sense, but it doesn't. It is such a good investment to pay people very well and to gradually atrophy the ones that are not, really, really great folks and accrue the ones that really are. It pays such huge dividends. So yeah, that's an important part of this whole thing, is that you get good people and you have more fun, you're less stressed out, and you're thinking about the planet.
So let me ask John, you mentioned strategic planning process. So let me ask you, what is different about the strategic planning work that you and Steve do for companies versus maybe the traditional, back to the MBA, the traditional model we learned at business school?
Yeah, excellent question. I'm just now working on a presentation to a local group here about that. I put up a big list of the factors that go into a strategic plan, a standard one, and there's about 30 things or some number like that. But then I have 6 slides that are not in that list. like, let's really go into values deeply. We don't just wordsmith that thing. And I say, please don't just say integrity is one of our values. It's just such a knee-jerk thing. Stop and say, what do you really value? Really, I mean, you as an individual, you're the CEO, you're the CMO, you're the CTO. What do you really value? So we do that. So there's one thing that we really dig in. The second one is, we've already touched on this, Doug, is stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? Do you think of your employees as stakeholders? Do you think of your supply chain? Supply chain is very important when it comes to with global warming. The stuff that goes into your product, if you're a manufacturer, and then downstream, you ship something out the door, and then what happens to it? So we think about that kind of thing with stakeholders. Of course, your customers, that's a key one. So there's two. A third thing, I've already mentioned this, but I say to the client, or what are the causes of climate change? Because if you're going to help with that, you need to understand the causes. And yep, CO2 consumption, all that. But this idea that I mentioned a minute ago of alienation, that figures in. There's things you can do as a company about that. So where might that pop up in your business? So there's three things. I'm going to just work on this presentation so it's right on the tip of my tongue. Obviously, planetary impact, carbon footprint. I've done quite a few strategic plans for people. We've never talked about carbon footprint. But what is your carbon footprint? And it's, depending on how deep you go with it, it can be challenging to compute it correctly. They have three scopes, they call it, scope 1, 2, and 3. Let's get that figured out, and then let's Pareto that and go after it. Try to attack it. Yet another one, I hope I'm not boring your listeners with all this, but this is stuff that I never did as a strategic planner before.
Right.
Leadership processes, advanced processes, like Steve talked about MOCA with you. MOCA is an approach to accountability. And I'm telling you, every company I've ever consulted, I spent a couple of years consulting, 10, have an issue with accountability. Hey boss, I'll have that on your desk Friday afternoon. Well, Friday comes and goes. It's not on his desk. Now what are you going to do? Go yell at the person? Go beat him up? What? MOCA stands for, and I always need to look at my little cheat sheet, motivation. How motivated is the person to do it? Really? Do they really want to do it? Opportunity. Do they really have the opportunities? You've heard this before. Well, boss, if you're going to ask me to do that, what am I going to not do?
Yeah, that's right.
What am I going to get to it? Clarity. Do I really understand MOCA, M-O-C-A? Am I clear on what you expected? Oh, you wanted a 10-page report, and I just gave you a 3x5 card. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on that. And then the last one is A for ability. When I was at HP in the engineering group, our interviews were amazing. All day long, technical questions. We wanted people who really could do the work. And I'm amazed when I see companies that they'll ask an applicant about values and about fit, about culture, good things, really good things to ask about. But somewhere you got to find out, does a person actually know how to do the job? You'd think that'd be simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those four things, MOCA. Now, backing up to the question about strategic planning, I view those kind of advanced leadership processes as strategic. They're not just tactical. They're not just get the crank going and get the job done, but they impact your culture. And your culture and your strategy are the two big things that the C-suite has a handle on. And,
Right.
and culture, as one wise guy said, eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
So if you can,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
You can have one of the best thought, analyzed, and laid out plans in your long-term and even near-term strategy, but if your culture doesn't support it, and to tie into that, more recently, one of the best definitions of culture that I've heard says simply, culture is how we do things. And I when I first heard that, I thought, it's a lot more than that. And then I got to thinking about it, and I go, well, not really, because the point being, how we do things. You say on your, gold letters on the wall, we want to provide, world-class customer service. Okay, great vision, great maybe mission, or maybe that's a value somewhere, but how do you do that? And do you have the right people that are at each step of that journey for the customer to really contribute to that being a world-class experience?
mm-hmm.
And I've come to really embrace that definition of culture as really important. And I've frequently told the story. I know a mid-market company. It's a general contractor who, when I got to meet him and got to know him, and I did a tour with him, looked at all his job sites, and it's a good sized company. It's about a $40 million topside company, maybe more than that by now. But I asked him, I said, so talk to me about your culture and your mission, vision stuff. He said, simple. He said, we do the right thing. I said, I kind of blew it off, like you said about integrity. I said, well, that's easy to roll off the tongue. I said, but what does it really mean? He said, no, I'm serious. He said, as we walk through the job sites, observe what's going on, and feel free to ask any of my people when you see what they're doing, ask them and find out. And what he told me was, he said, basically doing the right thing. He said, a classic aspect of general contracting is you bid a project, you go to work, and something goes wrong. You dig the ditch in the wrong place, and the feed line for the electrical coming out of the foundation is 3 feet off of the spot it needs to be in. So what do you do with that? Well, typically in construction, you retrench, you reinstall, you do all that. Well, there's a cost that goes with that. So you plow that into another line item somewhere, and you issue a change order, and you get your money. So the cost of the project goes up by whatever that error was. He said, my company, we don't do that. He said, we eat that.
Oh.
And he said, the benefit is this. He said, my customers know that that's how we operate. So we enjoy the luxury of, we bid high. We're not the highest bidder usually, but we're high. And we tell people, this is our number. So, but you won't have overruns from us. If there's ever an overrun, it's something you asked for in the scope of things to change. And he said, so if we make a mistake like that, we eat it. And he said, and I don't penalize my crew for it. I don't plow it back to the sub. I don't, we have a discussion, but I don't unnecessarily penalize them for doing it. I view it as my cost of business. And I thought, wow, that is unique and that is different.
Yeah, I like that. Really like that. Just so simple to do the right thing.
Yeah. So
I once heard about Nordstrom that, that's top end retailer. And I heard this, I sort of secondhand, that their manual, how to treat customers, is like one page. Do right by the customer. And I've had personal experience of going in there and really, really being treated right, having them go the extra mile, just like your contractor friend.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot to that.
And again, it comes back to culture being simply defined as how we do things.
Yeah. Yep.
But to your point, in the hiring process, it's so vital for leaders who are running these businesses to put the right emphasis on the hiring process so that you are, I agree with you, you have to test for ability per the MOCA model. But there is also a heavy test that is often overlooked of behaviors that fit the culture, personal principles and values,
Yep.
and it goes back to being motivated and you got to be motivated to do the right thing.
Yep.
You might know what the right thing is, but if you're not motivated to do it, it's not going to happen.
Yep. Yep. I agree. I agree 100%. So, yeah.
So, what I know you don't represent yourself as a futurist, but given the nature of what we're talking about here, what do you see happening in the next, like maybe 10 years for business?
Yeah, good question. Let me just roll that around in my head. I guess I kind of see a bifurcation. I think we're at a fork in the road. I think some businesses are going to hold on to the old mode. So in the world that Steve and I work in, fossil fuels. The big fossil fuel companies are going to continue to push that and be profitable and so on. And that to some extent, the government may back them and sort of shift over in that direction and the government may shift away from investing in, subsidizing, tax breaks for, and all that, companies that are leaning toward the other pathway, which would be the future of energy or the future of anything. So I'm feeling that already, that there's that split. And the companies that are opting toward the future that are saying, well, gee, we can't go on forever with fossil fuels because A, there's not that much left in the ground, but B, the effect of CO2 from burning that stuff is killing us, right? It's already killing us. And already I'm reading that the models of climate change are being exceeded by the actual temperature rises. So they've got that. So some companies are going to head for the future and some are going to try to hang on to the past more and more strongly. So we're going to have a kind of a cultural clash in our country with that. And I think the larger companies that are holding on to the past will be successful financially, at least in the short term. And the ones that are heading toward the future are going to need help and support. And they'll have setbacks, as you always do. But we have, like, for example, Steve and I have one company that's kind of aligned with us up in Seattle. They make a very simple product. It's a repair tape that you use on down jackets and down sleeping bags and stuff like that. And you think, well, gee, that's pretty simple. But it works perfectly. It blends in with the colors. It sticks like crazy. I've used it on a jacket. What's the big deal with that? My jacket is going to last me a long time. I'm not going to need to go buy a new one. And you say, well, gee, that slows down commerce. Yes, but it also reduces waste pretty big. A simple company, but the guy that runs it is very conscious, very mindful, thinking about the future. We cannot have an unlimited waste stream that's growing. So he's one of these on that side of the bifurcation. He's over there pushing the future. So that, I think that's the large. I'm making this up as I go, but I think that's the biggest split I'm seeing, is companies that are going to truly try to read what direction it's heading in, and then those that aren't. And I'd throw this in just as it makes me sad. I worked in electronics. I think we have said to China, hey, why don't you guys go ahead and take solar power? Why don't you just be the ones that are going to supply that? We have not really invested in it as a country, whereas the Chinese really have. And I think that's really too bad, because I'm just believing that solar, including wind and including hydro, is got to be the future. We've got to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. So we've got that to contend with. But anyway, that's my longish answer to what you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying about the fork in the road, and I do think, and as most of my listeners know, I'm based in the Houston area, so you, as the old saying goes, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting somebody in the oil field business. So I certainly hear a lot of the dialogue on the carbon-based, fossil fuel-based initiatives. All the big oils are working on alternatives, and they have made big investments. But I think the reality, as our dependency on manufactured goods has evolved, everything has a component now that somehow came from a barrel of crude.
Yeah.
If those that are most vehement about climate control and way out on the end of that spectrum, I've heard it asked the question, can you show me your cell phone? Yeah, here it is. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
90% of that device is all fossil based.
Yep.
And it was the materials that make that phone work came from some paraffin, some plastic, something. And when you start saying, okay, you want to eliminate all that, fine. How are you going to build a phone, or how? Let's talk about the composition of the clothes you've got. You talk about that jacket. What was it made of originally?
Yeah, exactly.
And so there are so many permutations of this argument, and that's why it's so darn hard to get consensus. It is not a simple line in the sand, step here or step there. We're not going to solve it that way.
Yep. Yeah, I am really coming to agree with that perspective. I hadn't thought of it very much up until the last few months, but when I said a minute ago, 2 levels of cause for climate change, the physical one and then the alienation one, the psychological one, there actually is a third one, systemic. And it's just what you're talking about. Our systems are so intertwined. Henry Ford invents a car, well, didn't invent it, but he builds cars en masse. They need fossil fuel to run. They need highways to run on. They need banks to finance them. All that works together. And you can't just pull one little piece out of that and have the whole thing go on.
Right.
So people who are real kind of rabid about that, I think they may be not serving. I have emotions too. I mean, we all do have emotions about stuff, but we've also got to be real reasonable about how we make that work. And your point about the cell phone, I mean, I worked in electronics for 30 years, and there's a lot of energy in electronics. There's also a lot of toxic materials, not used in huge quantities, but you do have them. Gallium arsenide. I work with high frequency semiconductors made out of gallium arsenide. Well, the arsenic is in there, and you've got people working with that stuff. So we've got to think systemically or systematically about those things, and you just can't say, bang, we're not ever going to do that again. So.
Yeah. Well, and the good news is there are some great companies that are making commitments and taking strides. And I alluded to the prior episode with Vanessa. She has written a book that has 60 case studies of the companies that are getting it right.
Wow.
And so there's a story to be told. Excuse me. And one of the ones that actually is one of the case studies in her book is a company I've done some work with, working with their executive leadership teams. It's called Interface. They're a carpet manufacturer. So typically, predominantly in commercial buildings, they've provided, I think, more than half of the carpet in Silicon Valley. All the buildings there, all the campuses, and everything you think about Silicon Valley. But one of the journeys they've been on, but they've been doing this sustainability thing for 30 years.
Yeah. Yep.
And a couple of quick examples as time allows here. One of the things they did when you think about carpet installation, what's the traditional way to lay carpet? You got this gooey, smelly, toxic glue that has to get spread, and they trowel it on, and then you lay the carpet down. It sticks, and it sticks forever. And if you ever want to demolish that, there's a whole process with more toxic chemicals to get everything cleaned and prepped to go forward. So one of the things they've done, they went out, they asked, one of the key questions driving their initiative is, what does nature do? And they have found several solutions. Number one, in terms of their underlayment, they studied what turned out to be the metaphysical aspects of the gecko, how a gecko climbs walls and trees. And everybody kind of classically in the cartoons, they think they've got suction cups. They don't. It's little microscopic fibers that are so small they can fit into any pore that's on a surface and get their traction that way. So they borrowed that idea, and their carpet now has a very fine, basically hair on the backside that when you lay it down, the weight of the carpet alone creates traction and suction in effect, and it doesn't move.
Wow.
So there's zero glue involved.
Wow, that's a fantastic story.
Zero glue involved. And your disposal and cleanup, if you ever do decide to remodel and remake things, and their carpet now in the materials they're using are 100% recyclable.
Wow.
And so when they get an order to do a remodel, if they had original carpet on the property, they take it back and they process it and repurpose it and feed it back into their mills for new runs of carpet.
That's so cool.
So they are a self-contained ecosystem that is not disposing waste on the planet.
Yeah, love it. Love it. And we're finding that too. Steve and I are running into companies that are doing really right things at scale.
Yeah.
Tell me the name of the gal again that wrote the book.
Vanessa Thompson.
Vanessa Thompson. Okay.
Yep. Great cast.
That sounds really good.
So, John, I think we're about up on time for today. Thank you, sir, for sitting in, and tell our friend Steve hello for me next time you see him. It's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Same here. And Steve just extolled the virtues of talking to you, Doug. He just had a great time. So as did I today. This is really satisfying. So.
Well, great. Glad you enjoyed it. Tell folks the best way to get a hold of you if they would like to continue this discussion.
Yep. Email would be john@thegloballyconsciousleader.com.
thegloballyconsciousleader.com. Great. We will put that in the show notes as always, folks. And one last time, John, thank you, sir, for sitting in with us. Appreciate you.
Doug, thank you. See you later.
All right. Well, folks, at this point, I'm going to let you get back to your day, your business, your agenda. I do like to remind you, we've got a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name. That is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the archives. You can see some of these shows that we referenced. But for now, we're going to sign off, say goodbye. Go out there, make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.